everyone, it's Alyce, and today I'm going to talk about some books that I've given 5 stars that I've never heard mentioned on BookTube. So you might be able to call this like underappreciated books or unknown books. I'm sure that you've probably heard of some of them, but it's just in my time on BookTube, either I'm the only person I've known mention them, or even I haven't mentioned them because I read them so long ago. I'm going to try and share the title of the book and the author's name, and then a tiny little bit about it, like why I liked it so much. Some of them I read before I had my blog, so I can't remember too much about them, but they're books that at some point in my life I gave 5 stars to, so they're definitely worth picking up, and hopefully you'll be able to find like a hidden gem in here somewhere that you will love as well. To start us off today, I'm going to talk about The Innocent Story by Nikki Singer. So I actually only hauled this last month, but I read it way back when I was either 10 or 11. So in this book, a girl gets killed in a terrorist attack. She's like caught in the crossfire when I think it's a bomb goes off, and her spirit leaves her body, but she isn't put at rest. So her spirit is kind of floating around the earth, watching the people who have impacted her life. And she's trying to not get revenge, but kind of get closure on what's happened to her and come to terms with the fact that her life has ended so much earlier than she'd expected it to. It is a beautiful story. I gave it 5 stars when I first read it. I do want to reread it. So it's convenient that I've just managed to find a copy of it in a charity shop. I'm hoping that I will love this as much the second time around, because this one sticks in my mind so strongly, even though I read it over a decade ago. So that's proof enough that it is a really well written book. The next book I'd like to talk about is Tomorrow When the War Began by John Marsden. This has been adapted into a film, but it was many, many years ago, so I'm not sure if you would have heard it, but this is the first book in the Tomorrow series of 7 books. It's set in Australia. These kids go camping in the Australian outback, and then when they come back, they realise that their town has been invaded, and their world has just completely changed. I've only read the first book in this series. I definitely need to read the rest of them, but it's action-packed and it really does make you care about all of the characters. Leaves off on a bit of a cliffhanger, so I have bought the rest of the box set. I just haven't continued with them yet, but that is something I want to prioritise sooner rather than later, because I really think this could end up being a favourite series of mine. So if you like dystopian books but you want one that feels a bit more realistic, as though it literally could happen tomorrow, and you're interested in like how teenagers react in war situations, then this is a series I would recommend for you, or at least a first book. The book that inspired this video was actually Wild Blue Wonder by Carly Sorosiak. So Carly posted an Instagram picture of Wild Blue Wonder when it was its 2nd birthday, and she basically said like, oh, I'm really sad that this one didn't sell as much as I'd expected it to, because it's like the book of her heart. And I'm surprised this one doesn't get more appreciation, because this book made me cry while walking down the street. It got to the end of it and I was literally like reading it on my phone, just weeping. So this is about a girl whose friend sadly passes away. It's somebody that she's always worked with at the summer camp. So it's now the next year at the summer camp, and she is dealing with her grief because he isn't there. And it's her coming to terms with what happened, how it all went down, and how she's going to move on with her life without this person who she's always had at her back. So this one is very upsetting, but it's so beautifully written, and it's so emotional and so emotive, and you can't help but really deeply, truly care for these characters. I really want to read Carly Sorosiak's If Birds Fly Back, because I think that's going to be much of the same. That she's only actually written 2 young adult novels at the moment. She's actually gone on to write, somewhere behind me, some middle grade stories instead. But if you have read Carly Sorosiak's middle grade stories and you're interested in reading her young adult writing, then I would definitely recommend Wild Blue Wonder to start with. The next book, or author really, I'd like to mention is Gillian Hoffman, who wrote Retribution. So this is a crime novel. It's the first book in the C.J. Townsend series, but I've actually read and rated 4 of Gillian Hoffman's novels 5 stars. I think her writing is astounding. Instead of focusing intensely on the crime, C.J. Townsend is a lawyer, so it's more about the prosecution and how the legal repercussions of the crime play out, like how they actually get a conviction and the way that the case kind of comes together. So I find that fascinating because not many people actually look at it afterwards. It's the reason I like is it Law and Order? I've only seen the UK version, but that does basically the same thing. It focuses more on like the courtroom drama, and these really bring that to life. I think the reason I haven't heard anything about these on BookTube is because they are very old. I think Retribution came out either 2004 or 2005, and Gillian Hoffman only releases like one book every 3 or 4 years. So I've got a couple of hers that I haven't read yet that I'm still hoping to get to eventually. But she is an author I would certainly recommend if you do like crime novels. I just think most people, if they've read them, they probably wouldn't talk about them anymore because not many people reread crime. This is a series I want to reread soon because Sean hasn't read them and I think he would really like them. So I will be rereading these hopefully this year at some point. So you'll be expecting to hear more about these from me in the future, but hopefully this will give you a crime author to explore if you haven't read her novels yet and you're interested in crime. The next book I'd like to recommend is The Collector by John Fowles. Now this is a classic, so if you're somebody who likes classic literature and you haven't read a lot of it, then this might be one that you are interested in. This is a modern classic. It follows a guy called Frederick, but she calls him Ferdinand, so it's like a bit of both. But basically he falls in love with this girl called Miranda. He's absolutely obsessed with her and he decides that he wants to keep her safe and comfortable and cozy, and he just wants to protect her from the world, so he kidnaps her and locks her in his basement. Not the best plan of action. I actually read this one when I was studying English literature in sixth form and I'd never heard of it before then, and this makes me want to read more of John Fowles' writing. You can see how much I read it based off the fact that it's all water damage and it's falling apart. I think I read it like 3 times the week that we first read this because I just was obsessed with this story. And I reread it with Sean and he also really liked it, and Sean isn't somebody who reads a lot of classics because he finds them boring, so that's proof that this one has a great pace and a really great writing style. So if you're looking for a book that's a bit of a thriller but also a classic, I'd recommend The Collector for you. Okay, so the next book I'd like to recommend is Unrivaled by Alyce and Noel. This is the first book in the Beautiful Idols trilogy. So this follows 3 people who are competing in some way to, I've just read the synopsis and I'm still not completely sure, but basically like they all get invited to this VIP club. I've got a feeling they're competing to do some kind of like promoting job, so they're all promoting this club and competing to see which best way they can do it. There's definitely some kind of competition in here, even though that doesn't sound like it from the synopsis. But basically this VIP actress comes along and then she disappears. So there's the mystery there of like where she's gone, and there's the 3 viewpoints who are trying to better themselves while also trying to solve this mystery. I haven't read the rest of the series yet. I definitely need to do that because this one I gave 5 stars. I was tempted to put Alyce and Noel's other book Evermore on this list because I did give that 5 stars when I read it, but that is one that it's a very stereotypical YA paranormal romance, so I don't think I would give that 5 stars if I reread it, and I haven't actually carried on with the rest of the series, so if I do reread that one, we will find out together whether I still like that as much as I did when I read it the first time. But Unrivaled I read more recently and I still have fond feelings of it. I'm still intending to carry on with that series sooner rather than later. So another book that I would recommend for you if you like books about spoiled rich people, LA, like disappearance mysteries and multiple perspective novels. And I'd also like to recommend Stolen by Lucy Christopher. This is Lucy Christopher's debut novel and it's about a girl who is in an airport and she gets kidnapped, and her kidnapper takes her into the depths of the Australian outback, so she has no way of getting away from him or back to civilization, and it's about Stockholm Syndrome, the way that she begins to develop feelings for him, but is she actually developing feelings for him because he has just kidnapped her? It's a fascinating look at psychology, and I have read no other books about Stockholm Syndrome, so if you're interested in that as a syndrome, and if you're interested in like the psychological repercussions of Stockholm Syndrome, this is a book I'd recommend for you. The next book on my list is Sing You Home by Jodi Picoult. This is another one that I actually don't remember much about. I know that it's a lesbian love story and it's an adult contemporary. I liked it that much that I bought basically all of Jodi Picoult's books on a eBay bundle deal. So that's a recommendation, that I went out and bought loads of her other books after reading this one. I've got a feeling it's a lesbian couple who are trying to adopt one of their sons from a previous marriage. but I might be getting it confused with something else. But if you are interested in reading Jodi Picoult's writing, I would recommend starting with this one because it was astounding, and I did give it 5 stars. And for somebody who doesn't read a lot of adult contemporary novels, especially ones that are kind of more issue-based, I would normally rate it a bit more harshly because it's out of my comfort zone. So the fact that I just fell in love with the story and these characters is a huge recommendation. The next book I'd like to mention is actually part of a trilogy, and I would recommend this whole trilogy, and that's the Revivalist series by Rachel Caine. This starts off with Working Stiff. I've recommended these a few times recently, but I'm still the only person I've seen talking about them on BookTube, so I'm going to continue shouting about these. But this is a girl who starts working in a morgue. Like a funeral home? Not a morgue. But they get a body in and the body comes back to life, and Bryn sees this happen and is like, what the heck? What's going on? And she gets dragged into it, and I think she ends up getting killed and coming back to life herself. So it's kind of like a zombie novel, but she's trying to solve the mystery behind why people are being brought back to life, and obviously coming to terms with the fact that it has also happened to her because she is a very young woman, had her whole life ahead of her, and now she is dead and reincarnated. This series is amazing. I need to reread them. I love the romance in here. I loved the action, the pacing, the plot. This is very unlike me because nowadays I finish the book in the series and then I pick up the next one as soon as I can. Otherwise I constantly feel like I have to reread the previous installment because I can't remember what happened. But these books, basically as soon as it hit release date, I reserved them from the library and I read them as soon as they came out because the story was so vibrantly in my mind from the previous year, and that doesn't happen to me a lot. So that shows that this is a world that really does pull you in and keep you engaged and interested. If you haven't read any of Rachel Caine's writing, I'd recommend starting with these. I actually have basically all of her other books and I haven't read them yet. So if you've read any of Rachel Caine's other novels and you would recommend a different series to move on to, I would really appreciate that, because I think I've got all of the Morganville Vampires, I've got all of the Weather Wardens, I've got all of the Stillhouse Lake novels. So I just need to get moving on them. I just don't know where to start because they are very long series. Another series I would recommend is the Need series by Carrie Jones. This is another one that I was tempted not to put on this list because it has been many, many years since I read them and I cannot remember exactly why I loved them as much as I did, and I'm not sure if I would love them as much a second time around. But this is a fae novel. It's a YA paranormal romance, but I'm not a fan of fae stories. I've read quite a lot of fae things over the years, like The Darkest Part of the Forest and the Folk of the Air series, and I've never been able to get fully absorbed in a fae story, but this series just blew me away. I don't remember why, but I gave all 4 books in the series 5 stars, and this was another series similar to the Revivalists where as soon as the next installment was released I just read it straight away because I wanted to know what was going on with these characters, and it was really easy to reabsorb myself in the world. I have read Carrie Jones' other novel After Obsession and I did not like that one, and I read that a couple of years after the Need series, so I'm not sure if that might have been evidence of my reading tastes changing and that I wouldn't enjoy the Need series as much on a second read. But this is one that I am keeping an eye out for in the charity shops because I would really like to reread this series because there's just something about it that I think I would still really love. I just can't put my finger on what because I read them like 10 years ago. Another book I would recommend is Sweet Damage by Rebecca James. This is about a girl who has, I want to say agoraphobia, but she's in her house, she won't leave her house, and the new guy kind of moves to town and I think he's trying to like break her out of her shell. Again, it's been a while since I read this one. I read this one 7 years ago, but I can remember just being blown away by the story. It feels kind of gothic at points because it's set in like this huge mansion that's a bit kind of disused because the girl isn't in the best state with her mental health. And I can't really remember too much about it. I know it's set in Australia and I loved that, but it's one that, again, I haven't heard anybody else talking about, and it was a kind of quite gripping, thrilling YA contemporary. So it is more of the contemporary aspects, but it does have that kind of adrenaline boost and it does make your heart race at points. So if you're somebody who likes scary YA that isn't too frightening, it might be good for you. Another book I haven't seen mentioned on BookTube, but I have seen the author mentioned, is The Geography of You and Me by Jennifer E. Smith. I've read this twice. The first time I read it, I gave it 4 stars, but then I bumped it up to 5 stars when I reread it with Sean because it's just so cute. So basically there's a power outage in New York in the middle of a heat wave, and this guy and this girl get trapped in the lift together, and they end up bonding. And then he moves away and they keep in touch through letters, and it's about them wondering whether this friendship that they made on this really odd, unusual night that they will never experience again, whether this friendship can be maintained and whether it could potentially become more. And it's just so cute. I need to read more of Jennifer E. Smith's novels. I've only read, I think, 2 of them at the moment. I do have This Is What Happy Looks Like that I haven't gotten to yet, but the other one I read was Pink. I will ask Sean if he can find the cover for it for me because I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. And it came out after these, so it won't be in either of these. But the other one of her novels that I read was like set in one night, and it was about a guy and girl who were going off to separate colleges and their relationship was like ending, and they were revisiting all of the things that, like, all of the places they'd been where they had poignant memories from their relationship. And I really enjoyed that one as well, and not as much as this one. But Jennifer E. Smith does a great job of writing YA contemporary novels. So if you're a fan of Morgan Madsen, if you like Casey West, if you like Rachel Lynn Solomon, then Jennifer E. Smith kind of did it first and did it really well. And I just want to read more of her books. But this is one that I don't hear spoken about on BookTube, so please pick up this one if you've read things like Windfall and The Statistical Probability of Love at First Sight. I've seen that mentioned quite a few times as well, but yeah, pick this up. The next book I'd like to recommend is The Smell of Other People's Houses by Bonnie Sue Hitchcock. I also hauled this last month because I finally found a copy of it in a charity shop. I read this on my library app and I just love it. So there are 4 characters and they are in completely different locations, completely different places, and somehow their lives become entangled in Alaska in 1970. But it's like a girl's father will move to the town, so she has to move with him, and then somebody else like is coming home from college for the summer, for example. So it's people whose lives shouldn't collide, but they do. So you follow their individual stories, and then you follow the story as they all come together. And it's just beautiful. And also one of the characters is called Alyce with a Y, so it's the same Alyce as me, and that was what drew me to the book in the first place, because I've never read another book with an Alyce with a Y in it. So you can read my life story, The Smell of Other People's Houses, but I loved this. There's also Bonnie Sue Hitchcock's new novel, Everyone Dies Famous in a Small Town. A lot of people have been recommending that recently because that's just come out. But The Smell of Other People's Houses was her debut, and I can attest to the fact that this one definitely deserves 5 stars. So if you haven't read this one yet, pick it up. The next book I'd like to recommend is The Boy in the Black Suit by Jason Reynolds. This is about a boy who is grieving for someone, and he starts working at a funeral home, which is the second one of these. But he's helping organise the funerals. So when they bring the coffin and the pallbearers, so he helps with like organising the wakes and doing the pallbearing and things like that. And funeral director, that's what it is. It's not the funeral home, it's the funeral director that he works for. But basically he's just like going to all of these people's funerals, and it's helping him deal with his own grief. And I loved it. I loved it so much, and Sean really loved it as well. I also really enjoyed Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, which is a novel told in verse about a guy who gets in a lift, and on each floor there's like people from his past come into the story. And a lot of people go on about that one on BookTube. I've seen that recommended a lot. I've never seen anybody else talk about The Boy in the Black Suit, but if you did enjoy Long Way Down, you will enjoy this one. And it's just got such a nice voice in it. This is making me want to reread it already because I did really enjoy this book. I've got 6 more books for you today, so I will continue to steam through this list of underappreciated 5 stars. The next book that I'd like to recommend is Volition by Lily Parody. This is an adult romance novel about a girl who returns to her hometown, and she's torn between the guy that she's currently in a relationship with and the guy who is like the one that got away from her childhood. And it's just so beautifully written. I absolutely loved this. I was sat in a cafe reading this book, and I can remember like my food was going cold because I was just so obsessed with getting through the rest of this story. And as somebody who doesn't read a lot of adult romances, that was quite unknown for me. I didn't think that it would grip me as much as it did. Unfortunately, Lily Parody has only written 2 novels because there were some allegations of, I forgot what it's called, like basically copying. Plagiary. There were some allegations of plagiary surrounding Volition because apparently it's quite similar to another author's novel, but also it's a romance book. I haven't actually read the other author's novel yet, but I will do that at some point just to see how realistic the allegations are. But I do think that when it's somebody who is more prominently published and has a bigger fan base, and you've got somebody who is an extremely independent self-published author, which was Lily Parody, it's very easy to say that they're ripping people off when possibly that might not be the intention, especially when it comes to romances. So many of the books have very similar plots, and it's all kind of, it comes down to the characterization and the way that you move your characters through those events. But that is something I will look into eventually, so do take this recommendation with a pinch of salt. But I've never heard anybody mention either Volition or Lily Parody's other novel, Ignite, so I wanted to throw this one out there. I'd also like to throw out Teeth by Shelley Cook. So this was kindly sent to me as a proof before release in 2014, I think. This was one of the very, very first books that I reviewed on my blog, and it's scary vampires. Really scary, like they're ripping people apart, and it is intense and it is violent and it is vicious, and I loved it. When you've got this compared to like Twilight level vampires, this is bloodthirsty. So if you are looking forward to the release of Empire of the Vampire, but you want something to bridge the gap before you get your new bloodthirsty vampire man, maybe give Shelley Cook's novels a look. Teeth does have a sequel now called Meat. I still need to read that one. I need to reread Teeth and then read Meat, but I will, again, hopefully do that soon. There are too many books. But I will hopefully do that soon, and then I can tell you whether the whole series is a 5-star, but again, one that I've definitely never heard anybody mention on BookTube. I'd also like to recommend Wild Swans by Jessica Spotswood. So Jessica Spotswood is the author of the Cahill Witch Sisters series trilogy. Still haven't finished that trilogy, but I really love the first 2 books. So when she released a YA contemporary, I thought I would give it a go, and this one, again, very beautiful. Lots of discussion about belonging and family and the way that you can feel like an outsider even in the place where you're supposed to belong. It's just a very beautiful book. It's just very beautiful. So again, fans of YA contemporary, another recommendation for you. Another YA contemporary recommendation would be You Were Here by Corey McCarthy. Corey McCarthy is the co-author of the Once and Future duology, which is a King Arthur retelling, but You Were Here is focused on a girl whose, I think it's her brother, dies, and she's trying to retrace his last movements and work out what happened. I can remember that there's sections of this that are told in like a comic, graphic novel-esque style and format. So if you're somebody who likes books that have multiple storytelling styles in there, this is one that I would recommend. Yeah, I probably need to reread this one as well because I can't remember. Something about like a roller coaster, like a Ferris wheel, is in my head when it comes to this story. And I don't remember why, but it was very beautiful, and I, again, gave it 5 stars. I don't give YA contemporary 5 stars very often, so that's why there's so much YA contemporary on this list, because normally for me a YA contemporary just 4 stars, wasn't amazing, didn't blow me away, but I still really enjoyed it and I would recommend it. But these are ones that I would lie down and die for these books. I just realised actually the last 2 books on this list are also YA contemporaries, so let's continue our contemporary kick. So the penultimate book I'd like to mention is Love from A to Z by S.K. Aly. This is about 2 people who have a meet cute on an aeroplane. He is travelling home from university because he is suffering with... So Adam is suffering from multiple sclerosis, and he is travelling home from college where he's going to tell his father about his diagnosis. And Zainab is travelling home for the summer because she's been expelled from school, I think, because she was calling out a teacher on sexism. So they're both kind of flying back home, and they meet on this plane, and it's just beautiful. This is another book that made me cry at the end. It's not even a sad ending, it's just such a, like, overwhelming ending because you get so attached to these characters and you don't want the story to end. S.K. Alyce has also written a little short story called the Eid Gift that follows these same two characters, and that is available on Riveted Lit as a free read at the moment. So if you are somebody who read and enjoyed Love from A to Z, I would definitely recommend picking the short story up as well. I will link that down in the description because it's Riveted Lit. I can just link it for you. But it's such a lovely little short story as well, and it just gives these characters so much more depth, and I really hope that S.K. Alyce chooses to write a full-length sequel about them. Like, even if it kind of ends up edging into, like, adult contemporary territory, I just want to follow these characters forever. They're beautiful. And the last book I'd like to recommend today is The Million Pieces of Nina Gill by Emma Smith Barton. This follows a girl whose brother has gone, and she is struggling to come to terms with the fact that he is no longer there, and she is rebelling against her family's expectations, and she is Welsh Pakistani, so she's got that conflict about what most of the people in her school do compared to, like, her beliefs and her parents' beliefs as her Muslim background. So she has that conflict of wanting to be what her parents want her to be while also wanting to strike out and live her life for herself. This book is astounding. There's a lot more going on in it that I can't spoil for you, but it does get to the end and it makes you re-evaluate the entire story so far. There's, like, a huge kind of reveal. I wouldn't call it a twist, but it pretty much is a twist. But it makes you re-evaluate the whole story, and it makes me want to reread it with that knowledge in my head to make me experience the story differently. But this is Emma Smith Barton's debut novel, and I'm really looking forward to reading more of her writing because it is one that I struggled to put down, and I was really mad at myself for not reading it sooner because the kind of mental health exploration is fascinating. And those are a whole bunch, I don't know how many, I haven't counted, a whole bunch of books for you that I've given 5 stars and I've never heard talked about on BookTube. So hopefully this will have given you a book at least that you're interested in, that you can go and find out some more about, and then maybe you can talk about it on your BookTube channel. And so let's spread some love for these underhyped authors and novels, and hopefully find a new favourite in here together. If you like this video, please give it a like, and if you'd like to subscribe, we would be super duper grateful as always. We post new videos every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, so if you pop back in a couple of days, we'll have some new content for you. Bye! I'm going to try and share the name of the book, the title of the book. No, that's the same thing.